Hold on, here we go.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the uh, DEI District Level Committee meeting. Today we have a full agenda. We want to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So, if we would, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the Republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Um, Welcome, everyone. And today we have quite a few things to go through. As you know, Marie is indisposed, so our illustrious superintendent is in McCownville answering questions, so she may or may not be on, but we're here to soldier forward. We have a great learning module today. Thank you, Mitch Hahn, for coming tonight and be able to walk us through the difficulties of creating spaces for critical conversations to happen and to unfold, and just look at what the ingredients that need to be there in order for us to be able to tackle some of these situations. Um, as we move forward, I guess we want to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Has everyone had the chance to review the minutes? All right. Do we have a motion for someone to approve? Okay, Chris approves, and we're seconded by Shaka um, and Emma. Thank you. Okay, the minutes are approved, and we'll move forward today. We have our committee reports. I see Leah here. Would you like to do the DEI in action report?
Sure, I could do that. So we'll do this and then the subcommittees after?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So DEI in action. Derek and I have been working with Dr. Wiles and the communications team on the climate survey that's going to be coming out for the district soon. And so we're going to be working on that. I think it'll be after budgets that will have this out for students, faculty and staff, and also parents. So we'll be looking out for that. The two of us also met with the Altamont Equity team as they plan for next year and the transition of the new principal. And we're really excited to have Steve come on board for that. I worked with a high school health teacher on her nutrition unit on late April on the 25th. I attended a lesson with some cookbooks from a variety of different cultures, a lesson that she did. And on the 2nd, I returned to the teacher's class for a food truck celebration, which was really pretty wonderful how students kind of took on, learned from some of the different cultures of those cookbooks and then kind of pick things that really resonated with them and created their own. So that was really neat. I attended a 7th grade math class where the teacher gave students some data sets of athlete salaries separated by gender and used that information to calculate like mean, median, mode. And they drew these really great conclusions using the data that supported their findings with these statistical calculations. So that was really cool to be part of the class and be invited to see, what that teacher was doing. I was also earlier this month in a social studies class again at FMS, where a teacher did a lesson on Trail of Tears. The two of us actually worked on some of that together, and the students got to learn about not just the history of forced displacement of tribal nations, but as well as they learned about intergenerational trauma and how it affects tribe members today. Which actually connected to a lesson that I did today in a tutorial class. So 2 teachers asked me to come in during the tutorials, and we called it a tutorial takeover, where I was doing a lesson and teaching using the picture book, We Are Still Here, Native American Truths Everyone Should Know. And tomorrow we're gonna kind of continue that, where now they learned about like some of the history aspects. We're gonna see President Day, a Native American life, with images from Project 5602, which is a photograph project where the artist was documenting and depicting at least one contemporary Native tribal nation person from each of the 562 current recognized tribal nations in the United States. So that's kind of happening tomorrow. let's see what else. So many things. Sorry. Derek and I, we also met with fifth graders, teachers at Pine Bush, and we're going to be doing activity with them this Friday on the diversity of humanity. I also was really happy to attend the GHS had their Lions Club. They had an LGBTQIA plus literature discussion. It was really great to hear different books that students were reading and kind of get some more to be added in my list of to be read things as well. Derek and I, we attended the Equity Officers Committee meeting at BOCES, and the two of us, along with two other individuals, we are going to be creating these affinity spaces for teachers, and not just teachers, but anyone in education to be part of these affinity spaces for the global majority. Let's see, earlier this week on Monday, or actually maybe it was Tuesday, I attended the Feminist Club at the high school. They had an author visit with H.R. Bellacosa. So that was really great. It was really well attended, and a lot of students had some great questions for that author. And I think the last thing is tomorrow, where this was the very last minute, but I was talking to an English teacher at the middle school, and Grace Lin, who's an author of, she wrote Chinese Menu, The History, Myths, and Legends Behind Your Favorite Foods. She's actually doing a webinar to celebrate her 15th anniversary of Where the Mountain Meets the Moon, and the 25th anniversary of the Ugly Vegetables. There's going to be a Q&A and a draw along. So I'm going to join that English class tomorrow for that webinar. And I think that's it. Derek, feel free to add anything. Sorry, that was a lot. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. No, you've been busy and I've been busy, and you've been all over the district, and that is pretty much, we've been active this year and definitely this month. And the only thing I would probably add to this discussion is that along the lines of the upcoming climate survey, it will be released to students, staff, and families on or about May 28th. So if you have need a specifics after the Memorial Day weekend, we're looking to launch that. It will be going out on our Thought Exchange platform. I guess we have got all the upgrades, and folks are working in the background to make sure all the data and all of the things we need to be able to launch that are coming along. We see a lot of the IT discussions going on right now, but we should be ready to launch at that time. Are there any other questions for DEI in Action?
Well, now that I see Mitch here too, I also want to give a shout out to the focus group because there's a space at the high school that they so generously are, helping us to have more of a presence in the high school area where the two of us can be and just be more visible for students. So really happy, and thank you so much for having that space for us.
Definitely. And I will say also that I did meet with one of our fellow DEI compatriots in the region from Bethlehem, and he provided some great feedback on DEI in athletics. It's a discussion that has been going on here, and has Matt Pitchnet, my predecessor, and Mr. Mazza had a training session, but we wanted to update that when I came in. So we were getting around to that, but we met with some folks who are doing the same thing, and they gave us some good background. So we should be looking over the summer to revamp that program and sit down with our AD in that area and be able to talk through some of the issues that we want to discuss with coaches and with the players, all of our athletes at the school. Okay, are there any questions or comments from anyone else about DEI in Action? Great, then we will move on to our subcommittee reports. Whoops, I'm sorry, my computer just flashed in and out. Okay, first committee is committee engagement.
Okay. Sorry, I got here a little late. Um, we had a really, I would think, productive meeting. We talked about revisiting the fireside chats for the future and doing more of a community outreach with the fireside chats. In fact, uh, Mitch, it was brought up by one of our students on the committee about your um, civil communications, and that maybe we could change that to community civil communications, and
Yeah,
perhaps
civil conversation.
civil
We
conversation.
call it.
I just walked in the house, so I don't even have my notes in front of me. But then we talked about maybe setting them ahead, maybe having a theme for each meeting, instead of just leaving it, out there. Yes, could it evolve into talking about so many things? Absolutely. But if we knew there's a theme for a particular meeting, people might come for just that one if that's the questions they have. So we did a lot of discussion about that, to provide, the people who will be on the committee in the future, some ideas to help that grow. That really, our current fireside chats haven't really met the need that we thought they would. And that, it's really time to revisit and expand on that. We also talked about the, at the high school, are they doing a lot of um, publicity for their upcoming event? And Chris, you can jump in at any time if I'm missing something. Um, and that, reaching out to channels 6, 10, 13, the enterprise, really getting it out there, because is the objective really to get the community involved at the high school too, not just students, but really bringing us together as a community. So I think that's covered it all.
Okay, does anyone have anything else to add or questions? All right, we can move on to communications.
Yes. So our meeting was also very productive, and it also was about very similar things. So I might sound a little repetitive in my share out, but I'll try to change the wording. So we did talk about the student rally that's coming up. Toma and Natalie attended the student meeting, and there's going to be a pre-meeting where Toma will be able to attend and take photos. And Toma is one of our communication specialists. Students also created a reel on the Instagram page to advertise for the event, which was similar to what they did for the school play, and it had a really great success rate. So they're thinking about doing something like that again in the future for other events. And there's also posters that they're going to use, and they're going to be available digitally as well. An update about the video, just as Derek had said. Oh, sorry, Derek, wrong part. Update on the video. They're still working on it. They're trying to think about getting the whole school year captured. So we're thinking that the video will be ready for the first day of school, because they want to make sure that we capture the signature events like graduation and the butterfly release, and also the ESY program. And we don't want to miss out on some of those key hallmark events for our video. So we thought it'd be a nice way for the opening day to share out that video then. The climate survey is being rolled out, and they're looking to distribute the survey right around the time that Derek said, which was right after Memorial Day weekend, after the budget passes, and to send it out in a standalone email that's all by itself, so that people only see that and are only focused on that when they receive the email. And we talked about how we would like to get together with the engagement committee to, again, look at that fireside chat. We talked about how maybe that it might be helpful if there was a topic or a learning component, or a theme to drive conversations, because we kind of thought that maybe people, when they attend, they don't know where to start. And when we first started doing the firesides chats, there was a lot of things going on. There was book bans and protests. And now there's not so much of that. So we're kind of thinking about how we could tailor those fireside chats and use some of the information that we get from the survey to kind of figure out what families are looking for, what and how we can make some adjustments to that to get more engagement. Who's the audience that we're trying to capture, and how can we advertise it so we can get more attendance and figure out who we might be missing. And that is what we talked about.
Excellent. Are there any questions from Diane?
I don't know if there's something for this year that we can do yet or next year, but I know like last year for each school we did like an interest group, and I felt like that got a lot of positive feedback because parents were able to talk about the issues at their school specifically. So that's something that I think that's something we should definitely look into again. Really.
Definitely. I think that is something we can definitely consider, especially given that we're going to be, once we get the data from the climate survey, if we're going to be able to parse it by school as well as amongst the staff. So we'll have a lot of information and a lot of, hopefully we'll have a lot of issues that we will know exactly where we need to go with some of these things and incorporate that into our approach for next year. Are there any other comments? Okay, Student Voice Committee. Varshini's not here to report for Student Voice Committee, but again, just along the lines of the anti-hate rally updates, the students have been making great progress in developing the logistics for that day. Connor Webb had put out a invite for folks who wanted to speak, for speakers, and gave awesome guidelines for folks and extended help to students who may want to say something but not know how to frame it. So those student speeches will be we're due on the 17th, so that's coming up in the next 2 days. So at the next meeting, they'll be discussing those and who's involved, and finalizing their program. Again, it will be held Thursday, May 23rd. It'll be from 3 to 6, I believe, in the parking lot, at the high school parking lot, and we're looking to have a great turnout. And we're just getting everything fine-tuned up until this point. So we're happy that the students are taking the lead on this and really showing leadership. Since it's my first year, I really get a bird's eye view into the student population. I'm really impressed with the way they work together. The research committee. I do not believe anyone from the research committee is here to represent. We had difficulty having a meeting prior to this meeting. So we held the meeting, but no one was able to show up. So it was, we decided to sort of end the meeting after 15 minutes. So we will be following up with the research committee afterwards. The research committee has already given, they had a tremendous insight into the questions we should be using for the parent module of the climate study. They went over all of the painstaking questions that were there and helped us narrow them down prior to us bringing them into further meetings with the with our provider and with our group at the district office. So it was really helpful, and I think we will have something that everyone will be happy with. So we'll be moving forward with that afterwards. Are there any questions or concerns about the subcommittees? All right, as we move forward, I will say I was asked to relate from our superintendent that the district received a strong response to the request for letters of interest to serve on the DEI committee. The Board of Education has completed a preliminary review of all the applicants. And the superintendent will be in touch with all new members prior to June 11th. The Board of Education meeting on that day when they will be appointed by the Board of Education. So she wanted me to thank everyone who submitted letters of interest. And we're looking forward to getting up to full speed, reloading with the old and new cast of characters and moving this work forward in the district. All right, at this point, I wanted to move into our learning component. Tonight, we asked Mitch Hahn to come in, largely because a lot of our discussions have centered around how to have difficult conversations, how to embrace and deal with the DEI issues are inherently difficult conversations that make people uncomfortable. And how do we get better at creating an environment where we can have these conversations? And what is the goal when we come together of having these conversations? We really need to start to unpack that a little bit. And in order to do that, we want to bring someone with experience in doing that. So we asked Mitch Hahn to come in. I think he needs no introduction, but many people are aware that he has a class and a student group that deals with critical civil conversations and how to have them. And I think that his expertise in how to build that, especially among students, and how he's created facilitators within that group and how he manages that would be helpful to help share some of his experience and sort of help us out to have a discussion around what are the strategies, resources, and things we should be thinking about if we are going to engage in fireside chats and bring people in and have those types of conversations, and just how we should be going about it. So I want to turn over the floor to Mitch at this time, and we'll have our conversation.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you for having me, everybody. It's nice to be here. Just a little bit of background real quickly. During the election year of 2016, on a Friday afternoon at 2:25, 3 students walked into my class who I didn't know, and asked me if they could talk to me as I had my backpack on, ready to go out the door, because they felt that when there was conversation, specifically political conversation that was happening in a classroom, teachers would stop that conversation as soon as it would get even a little bit where people would feel uncomfortable. And they wanted a space to have these conversations. And so I sat down with them, and about 2 hours later, on a Friday afternoon, we decided that we are going to propose a civil conversation club to the administrators. That first discussion about the club was productive, but it was decided really at that time that the climate was a little heated, and maybe it would be best to just try it out. And I believe the quote was, "Mitch, if you want to have a group of students in your room after school to talk, you go right ahead." So the students took to Twitter and other social media to set up a discussion about gun control. And we had 60 students in my room after school on that day. And the next day, we got our club sanctioned, and we were able to have it, which was great. And that's how Civil Conversation Club began, meeting every 2 weeks. And then a couple of years later, the students said, this really should be a class. And with the help of Bernie Bott, who is our librarian at school, who has many civil conversations with students, we designed a class. And the class got approved. And the class is specifically a senior elective. It runs one each semester of about 25 students each. Last year, we also started a faculty civil conversation on certain Wednesdays, where we would be able to have a lengthy conversation with them, and Bernie and I would facilitate that. And then this year on Superintendent's Conference Days, we were asked to facilitate, Bernie and I were asked to facilitate civil conversations with staff across the district. The first one being, why have civil conversations anyway? The club is led by 3 students. I don't facilitate that. The students facilitate it. The students come up with a topic and they facilitate the club meeting. The class runs a little bit differently. For the first 5 weeks, we learn about how to have a civil conversation. What Derek was saying about creating that space where people feel comfortable is really important. And in my class, we did a lot of informal talking about each other, trying to kind of gel the group to come together with the intent of honing in our skills of conversational literacy, which I call it. The students then do a podcast, and then each student takes a day and they facilitate the class that day. So we also teach facilitation skills as well. And that is it, really. That's what civil conversation is. I think one of the most important parts about entering into a civil conversation is the intent to walk into a conversation with the intent to listen to understand rather than listen to respond. And if people are willing to do that, it goes really well. It is not a debate. It is not an argument. It is a conversation strictly to understand people's points of view and to help other people understand your point of view. That's it at its simplest form. A lot of people get frustrated. Many times when I talk about civil conversation, talk about a topic, people will say, what did you all decide? But there is no decision. There is no necessary resolution after a civil conversation. The resolution is, I understand you better, you understand me better, and do with that information what you would like. Can there be resolutions to topics? Of course there can, but that is not the goal of a civil conversation. Where this is really difficult for people, in all honesty, is that it's really hard to listen to views that are completely antithetical to your own, especially when it comes to things like morals or values or things like that. It's very, very difficult because we respond from a place of emotion. And we take things personally because, we live our lives. I think it's really important when you have a civil conversation to have somebody who's facilitating the conversation, to stop someone who is interrupting somebody else, to help guide the people through the conversation, to call on people whose hand maybe goes up for the first time after people have spoken many times, to choose those people who haven't gotten a chance to speak. Conversation hijackers are a real thing. People who really like to jump into the conversation at any point, and that does not help with civility, because civility would mean that you're really listening to somebody before you are responding. So if your hand is up while someone's talking, you're sort of not really listening because you're already thinking about what you're going to say. Real quickly about topics, we in the class and the club, but especially in the class, do not shy away from any topics at all. How should people be allowed to protest? To what extent should identity politics play a role in our lives? Does our education system work for all students? Is cancel culture beneficial to society? Can democracy continue to function? How should the sports world handle transgender athletes? Does anti-racism education work? Is hate speech free speech? Always a very interesting topic. To what extent should guns be accessible to the public? When does physical discipline become abuse? To what extent should children be raised with traditional gender roles? Those were some that I picked out from the last, from this year's meetings and this year's class to sort of give you an idea of what those topics look like. With all that said, that's a lot. I'm not sure what else, Derek, you would like to help, but I'm glad to answer questions or enter into discussion or whatever it is you are looking for.
Can I say something? Because I actually had an opportunity to join a few of your classes this year, and they've just been wonderful. I like 2 things. One, I really think it's it's great to have the students pick some of those topics. And I know that there have been some when you gave a list of like, here's the topics if you're available on these days. And I might have picked a day, and then you might have said, actually the topic has changed. And I think that's wonderful. Like just because a student had picked a topic and thought they were interested in it, as they go through and research and look things up, and they realize, hey, you know what? I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about something else. And you having the flexibility and saying, yes, of course, because this is their topic. So I really appreciated that it is so, student-centered and student-led. I thought that was really wonderful. And two, another thing, and I think I probably mentioned it here before, as far as like the DEI in action going into your class, there have been times when, the topic or discussion, there are individuals who just are standing in very opposite directions of different things. And I think I don't know if it was the first or second time that I joined, where two students said, okay, let's talk more at lunch. Like they're really like, these conversations don't stop just because the bell rings. These are like actual conversations that happen in the real world. So I really like appreciate that aspect of that class.
We have a teacher who has a group of our students after my class, and she always lets me know that the conversation continues when they come in, and she's got to kind of settle it down, which is great.
Definitely. And it's that buzz. I think people see the outcomes and then want to have that outcome. The fact that students are excited and engaged and buzzing about talking about these issues, but it's it's laying that framework. I put up a slide just to give us a definition, just to make sure that we're getting the finer points of what Mitch had shared earlier. It's just the basic definition of a civil conversation, and use that as the background for this conversation. Mr. Laster.
Mitch, thanks for being here tonight. I appreciate your time. It's good to see you, my friend. I'm interested in your thoughts in terms of, from a systemic point of view, how do we introduce this concept, K-5, 6-8, from a developmental standpoint, right? The conversations that you can have with high school kids is different than the conversations you can have with middle school kids, which is different than the conversations you can have with K-5. So could you speak to the teachers who are interested in incorporating this in their classrooms and how you can differentiate that by level?
Sure. I think, Mike, the conversations would be different, certainly at each level, but I think the skills are pretty much the same at each level, which, are basic skills of listening, of thinking about what people are saying and responding. And I think that, certainly I wouldn't walk into an elementary school classroom and start have a conversation about identity politics, which a lot of seniors can do. But there are certainly other topics that can come up, and that can even be things like, what do we mean? What does kindness mean? What does it mean to be a good friend to somebody? And they don't need to be polarizing topics. I mean, that's a lot of fun and good in the high school. But if we're looking at just teaching the skill of conversation and the skill of being able to listen and respond and sort of tease out some thinking, those questions and those topics at a younger level shouldn't necessarily be a massively controversial thing. But yet they should still be things that kids might be interested in. If you have a group of students who like to play video games, to have a civil conversation of what's the best video game out there could probably spark some really, really good conversation where students are disagreeing on things. So maybe, I guess I want to go back to the old scaffolding of being able to sort of teach those skills, but certainly not with the sometimes explosive topics that come up in a high school. Chris?
I really, really enjoyed being able to attend one of your sessions on the superintendent conference day, and one of the 7th grade teachers I work with was there as well. and did do some of this work at a 7th grade level with significantly less heated subject areas, things like should teachers assign seating in classrooms and things that were developmentally. I mean, when you talk about some of those identity politics conversations, like trans athletes, and I think about trying to safely host that conversation with middle schoolers, my stomach literally gets very tight and tense because they don't have the skills to, if they don't believe that that's good, say it in a way that wouldn't directly hurt somebody in the room. And I think we're moving towards that. But at middle school, that would be really, really challenging. So, I have those conversations sometimes with students, but also trying not to implement my beliefs and things on them. So these are great opportunities to start having those so that we send kids up to you with more of these skills so that your conversations can be even greater and deeper and more wonderful. So I hope that some of the teachers who are looking to start having these conversations at the middle and elementary schools feel like, empowered by the sessions you do with adults. And I kind of want to come and visit some of those high school ones.
Come on down. Mary?
Mitch, how far ahead of time do you let people know what the topic is going to be?
For the class, they know the topics. They all have to, once the students start their rotation, those topics are on a huge list. Like Leah was mentioning, like I sent her the list. Every student has a date and a topic. With the club, the facilitators meet on Tuesdays, and then we advertise for the week. And then the following Tuesday, we have our meeting.
So if there is
it's
like a
about a
hot
week.
topic like the campus protests,
Mhm.
the club would probably be the group that would take that on. Am I guessing?
Or the class, either one.
Or the-
We've talked about it in the class. We have not taken that in the club, although we did have it this year about in the club question about how people should be allowed to protest, but that was prior to the campus protest, believe it or not. So we give about a week's leeway time in advertising, and they make posters and they hang them up, and we put it out on our Google Classroom, and we also put it on the news announcements.
And kind of tapping into your experience and expertise on this, as two of us mentioned, we're thinking of next year instead of the fireside chats to go with the civil community conversation. How do you think that could transition, on a bigger scale with adults and parents?
So that's a good question, Mary. I think it's all about intent. I think it's really important that people understand before walking into a civil conversation what a civil conversation is. You are not here to debate, and you are not here to simply defend your position. And you are certainly not here to try and change people's minds. And people forget that sometimes because in conversation, we're so used to retreating into our corners. We're so used to trying to get somebody to agree with us. And that is not how we do a civil conversation. Actually, the whole point is to walk away agreeing to disagree if that's the case, but having a better understanding of why people feel the way they feel, why people think the way they think. I wouldn't use the word fear, but what the difference between the class and the club is the class becomes a gelled community, conversational community. So what Leah's coming to see, those students have had weeks where they're working together, talking together, laughing together, very important, thinking together, enjoying each other's company, and also being involved in these conversations. The club pulls students from all parts of the school, right? And maybe there are some kids who have never attended a club meeting and now they're there. That's a little bit different. And that's where I see the community conversation. My caution in that is to make sure that people understand what they are walking into, because a civil conversation is intentional. And if it's intentional, then we have to make sure that everybody understands the intent going in. Does that make sense?
And I think with the fireside chats, we've kind of, tried to make it clear that we don't have answers to all the questions. We're there to listen, to provide some feedback, if we can, but kind of the same kind of idea of having a conversation about what someone's concerns would be. But we thought if we could narrow it down to doing specific topics, it may generate more interest because people, I really want to know about that, or I would like to go and talk about that. Might be more successful, kind of like the model that you're describing.
Yeah, I think that would be fantastic, and recognizing there's got to be a good facilitation on it.
Right.
And a facilitation isn't to quell anybody's ideas. It's just to make sure that the conversation stays civil and moves along properly, and that people don't try and hijack too much. I think that's important. We just quickly, and along with these lines, Mary, and back to what Mike was saying, and I think it was Chris who mentioned like people who may get hurt or offended. Part of going into a civil conversation, especially on big topics, and is the risk is that people will get offended. When I think of a safe space, I don't think of civil conversation. It's a safe space for people to discuss things, but it's not a safe space in the sense that you may get offended. Somebody may say something, probably will say something that may offend you. And we need to learn how to work with that. One of the ways I do that is we talk a lot about assuming the best intentions. I assume that people are not trying to offend me. I'm assuming that people have the best intentions when coming into a conversation. And if we assume that people have good intentions, then it's less likely that we will be offended, because what they said may sit wrongly with us, but we know they weren't trying to be nasty or mean or something like that. Does that make sense?
No, I think this is great. I was just reading an article of where someone was saying they're making it a point now when they go to to the store to get gas or something, trying to make eye contact with the other person and saying, how was your day? Or, thank you so much. And how we've lost that.
We have. With
social media and texting and not talking. So the idea that even going down, like Mike said, to the K through 5 and the 6 through 8, to start to get back to having that eye-to-eye conversation is huge. So great job. Great job.
Thanks. Garrett, did you have something?
Yes, I wanted to just relate that. I think you offer us a method to achieve some of our aims. And one of our aims is empathy. I mean, if you're doing DEI work, we have to increase empathy. We have to be able to perspective take. We have to listen. And we need to believe people when they tell their story, and I think part of that is built into what you do. If we're trying to intentionally create spaces where we can have those conversations and hear, listen for understanding, we're moving in the right direction. I also agree. I'm not a fan of the notion of safe spaces in the DEI environment because obviously people should feel safe to speak, but they're not really safe spaces so much as what now is being called brave spaces. We want to have spaces where people can take the risk of being vulnerable to speak in their voice. And we need, the students definitely are asking to be able to have a space to explore some of these questions. And apparently adults and folks want to talk about these issues. If we looked at if anyone watched the Board of Education candidates discussion of their platform, most of the questions revolved around DEI issues. So we know that these are topics that need to be explored. They just have to be done in a way that will facilitate the outcomes that we're looking for, like you said, with intentionality. So that's why I'm a big fan of what you do. We don't have to look far to find an example of this working in our district. It's not something we have to introduce. It's already here. We just need to take some of those skill sets and amplify them in our DEI work. So I thank you for coming out to sort of point us in the right direction and be that resource.
Yeah, no worries. I will just also share with you that it started organically, but it's become a tradition that to close a civil conversation, whether it's the club or the class, we applaud. And what we're applauding is we're applauding each other for being able to stay civil in what could otherwise be an explosive conversation. And it's gotten I don't even need to tell the kids, it's just automatic that we applaud at the end of the class or at the end of the club. And it's a nice way to close it, but it's also a nice way to signal to everybody like we're all good, we're all okay. And I think that's really, really important because they need to continue their day with each other. They need to continue their friendships with each other. You know, and I have a lot of students in class who are friends with each other, yet disagree on many things. And, you know, I think that's a fantastic and wonderful thing that they could air that out and talk about it and then, you know, go on and have lunch. So.
Definitely. You exemplify something I say a lot, which is my job is not to change minds, but to open them. Right. And here we have a great example of that happening in our district. And I'm sure we're going to be calling on you in the future as we begin to go down this road and to engage in some of these conversations, be it through our subgroups or our building level DEI action groups. We'll probably need some assistance along the way, but I think the quicker we marry these your methodology and what you've been doing to the aims of our DEI work, the better off we'll be in creating the type of buzz we see and that energy that we see in the students that attend your class. So we thank you for your service to our community. I've only been here a year, but as soon as I walked in the door, there was one of the names on people's lips to say, you got to go visit that class. You have to see what's going on there. And so it definitely is something I love when you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have resources right in our district, people with tremendous expertise and experience. And I'm looking forward to leveraging that through our DEI lens.
Thank you.
Mr. Laster.
I think every student in Guilderland would benefit from coming to your class and learning how to communicate effectively in the current climate. As a dad whose son participates, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing, and I wish every kid would be required to take it at the high school. It would make the world a better place, my friend. So thank you for the work.
Appreciate that.
Definitely. So we thank you for coming out tonight. I know Leah and I are going to a class at the elementary school and literally are going to be facilitating a conversation, which we hope will be civil. No WWE in the fifth grade classrooms, but a four corners type of conversation where students will be learning to deal with different points of view and be okay with that and start those conversations. So yes, we want to take the heart of this and amplify it as much as we can in our district. Are there any other questions for Mitch tonight while we have him? All right, if we can end by giving some applause then and give a hands up and a heartfelt thank you. Does anyone move, unless there are any other questions or concerns, to close this meeting to end tonight's meeting? All right, we have a hand, Mike first, and Chris seconds it, and a few other hands went up. So I thank everyone for coming out tonight and having a great conversation. I hope this is the beginning of many conversations along these lines. I stole the definition of a civil conversation from Mitch. He was able to share it with me, so I will be making sure that we have that information, that slide that I shared. Will go into the minutes, and that we will use that as the basis for developing how we will move forward with conversations in our midst. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming out
Thank you.
tonight. Thank you, everyone, for jumping in and being flexible. Thank you, Mike Laster, for being our videographer and timekeeper. And everyone, have a great night. Take care.